Hello, I'm Martha Glennie, jewelry professor at George Brown College in Toronto. My videos look at different jewelry forms, items. I'm offering tips, tools, and suggestions that work for me. Today's form is this lovely brass heart. Now this heart poses some interesting challenges, two in particular. It has a soft curve here, which we know is pretty easy to polish. But it flattens out right in the very middle there, and that poses some challenges for polishing. And it has this little indentation at the top, so we have to bring in some new tools for us to work on that. So yes, we have our sanding stick that we're used to using. Yes, we have our flying hand file, but we're also going to use needle files and needle files with sandpaper. And that's going to help us to reach down into that area and prepare it properly for polishing. So let's get to work. Our brass heart poses some interesting challenges. It has a nice curved surface here, but it's fairly flat at the top. And the back especially is a bit of a challenge because this form through the stamping is very uneven on the back. So doing it with our sanding stick to make it level on the back, really, it would take us so long. And we're going to approach sanding the back side here, or the edge of the back, a little differently. We're going to do it flat on a piece of sandpaper. So I'm going to change over and show you how to do that. So we have quite a ragged edge here on this piece, and it takes a little dip up here. So we have quite a lot of sanding to do to bring it down to a flat surface, which is our goal. So I'm going to use my paper flat on a surface. And an important tip is to make sure that your surface is clean, and make sure the back of your paper is clean as well. Now, some people do all kinds of things about taping this down, and I don't know. I find that takes too much time and it doesn't give as much flexibility. So I don't do that. But we're going to hold the paper down with my hand, and we're just going to go across the surface. Now, since the depression is there, I might turn this around and have my thumb be on that part where I can press a little harder in that area. And you can see from the sandpaper that it certainly is taking off some metal, isn't it? And I'm going to turn it, oh, maybe not that way. Did you hear that squeak? There we go. Now, I've done enough that I want to check it. Let's have a look. All right, that side's good. Oh, I need a little more right there, and I definitely need more work there. All right, let's continue. Now, I might put my thumb over there again. I'm using a full sheet of paper, a piece of paper that's never been wrapped around a stick because I don't want to contend with the score lines. And I'm using the whole surface. Now that's looking very good. It's just up here that's the problem. So you know what? Maybe I turn that around and now I've got fresh paper. This is a brand new piece. So it's going to cut more quickly. Another way to have your paper cut more quickly is if it is wet and dry paper, which this is, you can use it wet over at a sink and have a flat surface underneath it, have your paper wet, and do exactly the same as what I'm doing. But what happens with the water is it cuts more quickly because the water is lifting all these little bits of metal away. And so the paper doesn't get clogged up and it cuts more quickly. It's a great way to do this kind of sanding. It's a great way to do this kind of sanding quickly. Now, almost there. I just have the tiniest little bit. And you might say to me, well, why do I have to go all the way? Well, we don't want, right now, this is like a knife edge right in there. We want to see a consistent metal thickness all the way around so that it is consistent and looks finished, but also so that we don't have this sharp edge that can be, sharp. Cut your fingers. So I'm going to keep working here. I don't have too much more to go, but I do have some. And I have one last tip for you, okay? You can see that I'm sitting and that I'm above the work. I'm not working up on the top of my bench because then my arm would be up and I wouldn't be able to put as much force on the work that's happening. I would just be basically sliding it back and forth like this. Let's listen to this for a minute. Okay, now let's listen when I'm actually working. Can you hear that difference? This is what you want. And then remember, keep turning the piece around. So I'll continue working on this, and then we'll be ready to do the top surface, and then we'll be ready for the lathe. Our edge is all finished, and now, of course, it's time to look at the front surface. And we have a very ragged edge here from the shear of the stamping. So definitely we need our hand file. And I'm going to go over that area first, taking strokes that follow the form. And I'm not going to file the whole surface because, gosh, that would just add a lot of work and take a lot of metal away. But we are going to follow around. And I'm going to do the easier areas first. You know, sometimes we have a tendency to go to the tricky areas first. But I always like to suggest as a tip that you do the easier areas first, because while you're working on the easier areas, you're learning the form. And that will serve you well as you go into doing the more difficult areas. So I'm being very careful at this tip, as you can see, because I don't want to wear it away. There's just a little depression there that I'm going to get out. There we go. And then I'll come around, nice curved strokes, taking away, I'm not doing this. I'm taking my file away every time so that I can see what I've done. And I'm going to come right up over the top. This is a little more of a curve. Oh, now look, I've just started to do something a little different there, haven't I? And that is that I'm moving the file in a curve. Look, I'm also moving the object against it. So why am I doing that? Well, you have more distance on your file stroke that way. And therefore, you get things done more quickly. That takes a little bit of thinking at first because, it's a bit like that pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time. But it's a really useful skill. So start practicing it. Now I've come around as far as I can with my hand file. And what I need now is one of my needle files. And I have chosen a crossing file, which has a shallow curve here and a little more of a curve here, because this has a slight curve. And I'm just going to come in. Now this is a number 6 cut file, and that's important because I don't want to put a lot of deep marks in there, do I? It's a hard place to get into. And so for the sanding, to make the sanding easier, I want to just use a number 6 cut, or a very fine file. Now, depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you're going to find one side of this heart easier to do. I'm right-handed, and this is the harder side. So I do want to pay special attention to what I'm doing. And I want to have a really good look with my loop to make sure that I've done everything I need to in there. I think so. Just come up here a little bit more. There we go. Now, I bet you can guess the next step, right? We're going to go around the edge, and I'm going to take some new paper. There we go. Nice unused section. And support my piece on the bench peg very well so that I can make the most out of all my sanding. I'm going to do the curve. You see, I'm not going with the form now, am I? I'm going across it a little bit, not at 90 degrees, but just at an angle about like that. That lets me keep the curve and keep the form easily, but I'm going across the file marks so that it's easier to see when I'm done. So crossing doesn't always have to be 90 degrees. And in fact, with a curved form, we really don't want to do it 90 degrees this way because we may be putting flat facets on as this is a flat surface. So, and the other reason is we don't want to go this way is there's a real tendency we fall over the edge, right? So just do it at a slight angle. There we go. Round and round. And now we come up to this top area where I can only go so far with my sanding stick. Now we can use the sanding stick in a little different way, which is that I can use the narrower surface to come in here a bit, but I have to be really careful because this edge could make a groove if I'm not careful enough. So I'm just going to use that just a little bit there. And now this, again, this is the trickier side because I can't really see what I'm doing. So I think what I'll do, and I'll have more control, I'm going to use this same file and I'm going to take a small bit of paper and I'm not going to wrap it up because by the time I would wrap it up, it would be big and bulky and wouldn't have crisp edges. So I'm just going to fold my paper over it like that. And I like to also put a real good crease here. That gives me a definite edge. And I don't stick the end out here because that's sharp. You don't want to make any marks on your piece. So this can go in here very nicely. It's the same tool that I used for the filing, so it's going to follow the same pattern. I don't tape it on. I just hold it with my fingers because it's faster, frankly. And I don't want to get my file all gooped up with tape. There we go. Now, of course, I'm going to inspect it, make sure everything's good. And now I can do the top surface. So, it doesn't matter which direction I go, but I'm going to get in here and get the job done. Meet up to the other sanding that I did. Make sure the whole surface is covered. Nice round strokes on these fat little heart tops. You can see because the form is a little tricky, I'm not following a strict specific pattern. I'm just following the pattern that is the easiest in terms of supporting the piece and getting nice long strokes. All right, we've come up to looking at another one of the tricky areas here, which is that this surface is much flatter than this surface. And so we have to pay a little particular attention to sanding here, and we also have to reach down in here. So I think I'm going to come back to my needle file and bring the needle file and blend this form up here. And I think you can see, I hope you can see, that I'm moving the file constantly because I don't want to put any grooves in. So I'm changing direction, rolling it up, rolling it down, making it lovely and smooth so it's blended right in. All right, I've done my coarser paper. I'm going to go on ahead to my finer paper, and I'm going to pay particular attention to two places. This flattish area on the top and this area right here. I want them to be perfectly sanded so that I can go and have an easy time polishing and not build in problems for myself. So I happen to have a perfectly sanded one right here. My edge is flat and my surfaces are done. And then it's off to the polishing lathe. Here's our beautiful little heart. It's all sanded on the other side. It's got its edge done, and we're ready to do some polishing. And when we polish on this one, I would start with that edge. And that edge is going to be fairly simple to do. I'm not going to go this way. Ooh, bad idea. Because I'm going to lose my edge here. I'm going to follow as much as I can the form, still going across the sanding lines. Now, let's talk about this area right up in here, because this is the part where my tip to you on that is to think about using the corners of the wheel and putting some compound right on the corner, like that. And then you can come in and go right in there and get both sides. Again, don't over polish it because we'll lose our bumps. But that'll let us get right in there. That's looking very good. Okay. So this was simple, easy curved surface. This was a little trickier, not much, but then here's this area that's flat. And the difficult part about getting to this area is that you miss it. So we end up polishing a lot on this edge right here, but actually miss this. So definitely you have to change your grip to the finger on top and support the work and get this right flat to the wheel buff. I hope you can see that. I've got the piece exactly flat. Not like this, definitely not like this because it will catch, but right up there. And then I'm going to come in and change my direction up all the time because it's very easy to get a flaw that's called drag lines on flat surfaces. There we go. I did such a good job on my sanding that I've got that well polished just that quickly. You know, more polishing isn't always the answer. Too long on the buff can lead to lots of different polishing flaws and compromise your surface. So do the minimum of what you need to do. This one's all ready to get washed up and go to the rouge step. We have our polished heart. It feels so nice and smooth. It's without polishing flaws. It is has a good polish on it. I can see lots of triply lines, but that's okay. I'm going to remove the triply lines in my buffing process. So I have my muslin soft wheel buff, and I have my red rouge because this is a brass piece, and red rouge is for yellow metals. And so I don't forget, the first thing I'm going to do is do my bottom edge, and I'm going to hang on to it quite tightly, as you can see, because it will have a tendency to want to catch. There we go. That's all I need. Once around, that's the trick. Now I'm going to go to this easier part, and then I'm going to leave that trickier area again until the last. And I'm going to use that corner of the wheel buff to go down into that area. You see, I haven't added any compound. This is looking pretty good. So as long as things are going well, I'm not going to add any compound. This is not only bringing up a really nice luster, but it's not leaving any compound behind, which is even better. Now I find I'm having a little bit of problem with this flattish area in here. And as I analyze it, I think it's because this wheel buff is a little too soft. So I've gone to my collection of wheel buffs and I found this one. Now this wheel buff, it's the same, it's a muslin buff, but you can see that it's been worn down. And let's take a look at where the stitching is. The stitching is very close to the surface of the buff. So this presents a harder surface. And that may just solve my problems with that in this area right here. So a little bit there, and off we go. Using it exactly the same way as the other one, but that flatter surface will respond more readily to the harder surface here. Now when you have it as you want it, it probably from this harder rouge buff will have lines. So then we would just go back to this one and we're going to finish up. This is softer, it's going to do a more refined surface. So just very lightly go over it, and there we go. The other thing that you can do to try to get rid of the lines is just press more lightly. Okay. Whoops, one little bit of rouge. There it is. Now, let's have a good look here. Oh, that's looking gorgeous. My heart is happy, and so am I. That wraps it up for today.